3 days after the SAT scores were released, I came across a post asking for advice. Both my older and younger sons are going to Northbridge for college. How should I split their living expenses so it's fair? The comments were almost unanimous. Why is this even a question? They're both your kids. Give them the same amount. That's the fairest way to do things. I was about to scroll past when the newest top comment caught my eye. The profile picture belonged to my sister. Don't judge when you don't know the whole story. I'm their older sister, so let me be honest. You can't raise two boys the same way. The older one is pretty average looking, and he's awkward and quiet. Even if you gave him money, he wouldn't know what to spend it on. Meanwhile, the younger one is outgoing and handsome, with great style. One pair of his limited edition shoes costs over $2,000. If you ask me, the older one should get $800, and the younger one should get $8,000. Each child should get the amount they need. Beneath her comment was a reply from my childhood best friend, Whitney Jones. Couldn't have said it better myself. Besides, we'll all be in Northbridge anyway. We can keep your younger brother company, so your mom won't have to worry about him back home. Staring at the screen, I suddenly laughed until tears blurred my vision. When we were kids, we would play hide and seek. All of them would sneak off together, hand in hand, leaving me alone in the dark attic, covering my eyes and counting. Back then, I honestly believed that if I searched hard enough, I would eventually find them and become part of their little world. However, every time I opened my eyes, they had already slipped away with my younger brother, leaving to buy ice cream without me. It turned out nothing had changed since then. They were still walking side by side toward the bright lights of Northbridge, while I remained nothing more than an afterthought, someone brought along just for the sake of the picture. I deleted every university in Northbridge from my list and replaced them with schools in the far south, more than 1,000 miles from home. I was done playing the loyal supporting character in someone else's fairy tale. Their game could go on without me. Henry, come out and have some fruit. A knock on my door pulled me back to reality. Mom stood in the doorway, smiling warmly with a plate of freshly sliced apples in her hands. It's okay if you didn't do well. Don't stay cooped up in your room. I quickly closed the post on my phone and walked out to the living room. Mom handed the sweetest apple slice to my younger brother, Jeff Scott, before turning to me with a gentle smile. Even if you end up going to a community college, we won't look down on you. We can afford it. My phone screen was still lit. Henry, congratulations. I can't believe you got a 1590. That's an outstanding SAT score. I locked the screen and placed my phone face down on the coffee table. I know. My voice was barely above a whisper. Dad was flipping through a thick college admissions guide while my older sister and helped Jeff compare universities. Jeff really did great this time. A 1420 on the SAT should get him into one of the state's top schools. So, are you planning to apply to colleges in Northbridge or Brookhaven? And sounded incredibly proud. Definitely Northbridge. I heard Whitney's applying there too. Jeff leaned against Mom with a bright grin. None of them asked me the obvious, simple question. Henry, what did you get? Dad closed the admissions guide with a satisfied smile and clapped his hands. All right. We've got plenty of time to figure out the applications. As a reward for Jeff, I'm taking both of you boys to Summeridge Mall today to pick out graduation gifts. Whatever you want, I'll pay for it. Go get changed. My heart gave a tiny, almost unnoticed leap. I had not been given the privilege of picking out a gift at the mall ever since Jeff got seriously sick when he was 12. Okay. I stood up and hurried back to my room. I changed into a clean white t-shirt that had been through the laundry so many times that it was worn thin and soft. I even ran a hand through my hair, something I almost never bothered to do. Staring at my reflection in the mirror, I took a deep breath. Maybe there was still a place for me in their hearts. 10 minutes later, I opened my bedroom door. The living room was empty. My parents' and Anne's shoes were no longer at the front entrance. I stood there frozen, like a clown who had dressed up for a performance only to find out the show had been canceled without him. My phone buzzed. It was a social media post Jeff had made 3 minutes earlier. Family outing. Off to the mall to pick out my graduation gift. The attached photo was a selfie taken inside the car. Dad was behind the wheel and sat beside him, and Mom and Jeff were in the back seat. Together, they smiled brightly at the camera. It was a 5-seater car, but they took up every seat. There was no place for me. My fingers went numb as I called Mom. Hello? Henry? What's up? The line was noisy. I could faintly hear music playing inside the mall. You guys already left. My voice came out almost inaudible. Oh, I forgot to tell you. She sounded completely casual, almost cheerful. You stayed in your room so long that I figured you didn't want to go out in this heat. Just stay home and enjoy the air conditioning. There's still half a watermelon in the fridge. She did not even ask what I wanted. Instead, she had simply made the decision for me. Mom, I want those limited edition sneakers. Jeff's excited voice rang through the phone. Of course. We'll get you the most expensive pair. Mom laughed before speaking to me again. All right, Henry, I've got to go. We're helping your brother pick out his shoes. Click. The call ended. I tossed my phone onto the bed and ran both my hands through my hair, ruining the careful style I had spent so long fixing. It had always been like that. Whenever we played hide and seek as kids, I was always appointed as the seeker. Anne and Jeff would hide together, hand in hand, inside the bright, spacious walk-in closet in my parents' bedroom, while I was left alone in the dark attic, counting. By the time I finished counting to 100 and opened my eyes, I would search every room in the house but never find them. Later, I would find out they had already slipped downstairs without me to buy ice cream at the corner store. Growing up had not changed anything. I pulled open a drawer and took out an old photo album, its pages yellowed with age. In the first few photos, I was not even 2 years old. Dad was holding me high in his arms, and Mom was kissing my cheek, and stood beside us, making funny faces to make me laugh. I remembered something a relative had said during New Year's a long time ago. Henry, you have no idea how protective your sister used to be. I was only joking that you looked a little too chubby, but she scolded me for days. Back then, they had cared about me. However, after Jeff was born, I became invisible. He was handsome, with delicate features that made the difference between us impossible to ignore. Whenever relatives came over, they always said the same thing. Jeff is so handsome. He looks like a young movie star. Then they would turn to me and force out the same awkward compliment. Henry seems like such a good, honest kid. Honest. Mature. Never the type to compete for attention. Those were the labels they had pinned on me, and over the years, they had become a cage that kept me trapped for 18 years. A sharp knock at the door pulled me back to the present. I closed the photo album and went to answer it. Whitney Jones stood outside with a bright smile. Her high ponytail swayed as she lifted a pair of shoe boxes. Henry, guess what I brought? She held them up proudly. I got the newest basketball shoes for both you and Jeff. My eyes drifted down. Through the small, clear window on the side of the boxes, I could see 2 identical pairs of high-top basketball shoes. Thanks. I did not reach for them. I simply looked at her. Come on, take them. I even bought your size. She pushed one of the boxes into my arms before walking into the living room, as if she belonged there. Where's Jeff? I sent him a message, but he hasn't replied. They all went out to buy him a gift. I set the heavy shoe box on the coffee table. Whitney blinked, then smiled. Oh, they're shopping. That explains it. Why didn't you go? Let me guess. You were hiding at home playing video games again. She said it so casually, as if it were the most obvious explanation. I looked down at the basketball shoes, built for explosive jumps and quick cuts. The old scar on my right knee began to ache. 3 years ago, during our class basketball tournament, I had been sitting alone at the far end of the bleachers. Whitney had jogged over halfway through the game and handed me a bottle of ice water. Henry, you're up in the second half. Good luck. I had shaken my head. My knee's injured. I don't play. She had stared at me in surprise before sitting down beside me. That's actually pretty rare. Most guys our age can't sit still. You'd rather read than run around. You're different. After that day, every gift she gave me was either a rare edition of a book or a beautifully made set of bookmarks. Whenever we spent weekends together, she always assumed we would end up at the library. However, in just 3 years, she had forgotten all of it. Now the only person she saw was Jeff, the boy who loved running across the basketball court while soaking up everyone's cheers. The first time Whitney came to my house, during our freshman year of high school, Jeff had just come home. He was carrying a basketball. After we walked downstairs, she blurted out without thinking, "Your brother looks so cool when he plays basketball. He's so energetic and full of life, unlike you. You're always so lifeless. No wonder you're always saying your sister favors him. If I were her, I'd." Back then, I thought she was only joking. It was not until later that I realized the joke had been the truth all along, quietly shaping every choice she had made over the past 3 years. What are you staring at? Try them on and see if they fit. Whitney dropped onto the couch and casually urged me on when she noticed I was still looking at the shoe box. Sure. I opened the box, took out the brightly colored sneakers and slipped them on. The high tops wrapped tightly around my ankles, so tightly that even the old injury buried deep inside my knee began to throb. The pain spread until my leg felt numb. Oh, by the way, which colleges are you applying to? Whitney asked, not looking up. She was tapping away on her phone, probably texting Jeff, a smile lingering on her face. Jeff said he wants to major in finance, so I've been helping him look at colleges. What about you? I heard you'll probably end up at a community college. Well, at least Northbridge has a few decent ones. The 4 of us will still be living in the same city. We can go out for good food on the weekends. I walked to the coffee table and opened my old laptop. The college application portal was still open. Every school on my list was located in Northbridge. Now, as I looked at them, each one felt like a quiet mockery. I moved the mouse. Delete. Redwood University. Delete. Ashcroft University. Delete. Kingsley University. When the search box for my first choice school appeared, I calmly typed 2 words. Seabreeze University. It was nearly 1,000 miles from Northbridge. I clicked save, then submit. Whitney locked her phone, looked up at me and asked casually, "So which school in Northbridge are you applying to?" I closed my laptop, turned to face her, and answered calmly, "Doesn't matter." That evening, I heard the front door unlock. Mom, Dad, and Jeff came inside, carrying armfuls of shopping bags. Jeff was already wearing a brand new limited edition jacket from a brand collaboration. Grinning from ear to ear, he grabbed Whitney's wrist and spun around. "Well, do I look good, Whitney? Dad just bought this as my graduation gift. There are only a few of these in the whole city." Whitney smiled and nodded, her eyes lighting up. "It looks amazing. It suits you perfectly, and you look really handsome." Mom walked over and dug through the pile of bags until she pulled out a cheap black drawstring backpack. "Henry, I thought you could use this to carry your books." She handed me the nylon bag with a store logo printed across the front. It was from a free promotional giveaway. "Thanks, Mom." My voice was calm. Henry's always so easy. Dad changed into his house slippers and patted me on the shoulder with a satisfied smile. "Unlike Jeff, who loves dressing up and spends so much money, you've never cared about that stuff. You're frugal and thoughtful, and you never make us worry. You're a good kid." I stood there in silence. They had never once asked me, "Henry, do you want this?" They had simply decided that Jeff deserved the very best. As for me, I was expected to be grateful for whatever leftovers were handed to me, then praised for being mature. Jeff noticed I was not saying anything and suddenly tugged on Mom's sleeve. "Mom, did I spend too much? I think Henry's upset." He turned to me with a guilty look and pushed several designer shopping bags toward me. "Here, Henry, why don't you take these clothes and shoes? Mom and Dad already gave me $8,000 as a graduation gift, and gave me another $2,000. I have more than enough. You can have all of this." The living room fell completely silent. Dad froze with the glass still in his hand. Even Anne's expression changed. $8,000. I had never heard anyone mention that aloud before. "Henry, don't get the wrong idea." And was the first to break the silence. "I've only just started my internship, so money's tight right now. Once I get paid next month, I'll definitely make it up to you with a big gift." "Exactly." Mom nodded so quickly it was almost frantic. "Our savings account doesn't mature until next month. Once it does, I'll get you something nice too. We would never play favorites." They rushed to explain themselves, talking over one another, as if they were trying to cover up a secret they did not want exposed. Looking at the panic on their faces, I almost wanted to laugh. "You don't have to." That was all I said. "Henry, please don't be mad at Mom and Dad." Jeff's eyes suddenly landed on my desk. More specifically, on the faded wooden lion sitting in the corner. "Henry, if you're really upset." He pointed at it hopefully. "How about I trade all these new clothes for that wooden lion? I really like it." It was the only thing Grandpa had left me before he passed away. When I was 10, Mom and Dad took Jeff to an amusement park and left me behind at Grandpa's house in the countryside. Outside, rain poured from the sky. Inside, Grandpa wore his reading glasses, carefully carving that clumsy little wooden lion for me, one careful stroke at a time. After he finished, he rested a hand on my head and smiled. "Anything Jeff has, our Henry should have too. One day, our Henry will be just like this lion. You'll surprise everyone." Whenever life became so heavy that I could barely breathe, all I had to do was hold that little wooden lion. It always made it feel like Grandpa was still beside me. Mom hurried over. "Henry, since Jeff likes it so much, just let him have it. When you get to Northbridge, I'll buy you an authentic Gundam model." Whitney immediately joined in. "Exactly. It's not every day your brother likes something like this. If you want, once we're in Northbridge, I'll buy you a rare collector's edition action figure." One after another, they made the decision for me. They wanted to trade the most precious thing I owned for a free drawstring bag and a pile of promises that did not even exist yet. "Okay." I looked at them and nodded. Then I walked over, picked up the wooden lion, and placed it in Jeff's hands. He hugged it as if he had just found buried treasure. "Thanks, Henry. All right, everyone. Go wash your hands. Dinner's ready." Whitney laughed as she nudged Jeff toward the dining room. The whole family followed behind them, chatting and laughing together. I turned around, locked my bedroom door, and logged into an online marketplace. Then, without a second thought, I began listing everything I owned in this house, one item at a time. The day before the graduation celebration, the living room was filled with gift boxes of every size. Jeff stood in front of the full-length mirror, wearing a custom-made white suit, and carefully straightened his bow tie. Mom stood behind him, gently smoothing the wrinkles from his jacket. "Mom, where's my suit?" I walked over to the couch, where garment bags were piled everywhere. Without even turning around, Mom kept adjusting Jeff's cuffs and answered casually, "You've never liked being the center of attention anyway. Tomorrow, just sit with everyone else and enjoy the food. It doesn't matter what you wear." And walked out of her room with a dismissive snort. "Everyone's coming to celebrate Jeff tomorrow. You can wear whatever. She glanced at me. That white t-shirt you're wearing is fine. I watched them fuss over Jeff, circling around him, as if I were an audience member watching a play that had nothing to do with me. Okay. I smiled. It's comfortable anyway. Jeff turned around with his usual innocent grin. See, Henry knows how to keep life simple. I did not answer. I simply turned around and went back to my room. Late that night, the laughter and conversation in the living room finally faded. I locked my bedroom door and pulled my old suitcase from beneath the desk. I packed 3 changes of old clothes and my college acceptance letter. That was all I took. At 6 o'clock the next morning, the sky was just beginning to brighten. The rest of the family was still asleep, resting up for the graduation celebration later that day. Dragging my suitcase behind me, I quietly opened the front door without making a sound. Before leaving, I gently placed my house key on top of the shoe cabinet. In the middle of the marble coffee table lay one last thing. A metal bookmark. Its surface had darkened with age, and the edges were worn from years of use. Whitney had slipped it into my hand the first time. She took me to the library during our freshman year. She had smiled and said, "Henry, from now on, all my patience for reading belongs to you." I had kept it for 3 years. Now I left it behind on that cluttered coffee table. I pulled my suitcase downstairs and got into a taxi headed for the airport. The terminal buzzed with travelers as boarding announcements echoed through the building. I collected my boarding pass, passed through security, and stopped in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the morning sun was just beginning to rise, its golden light spilling across the runway. My phone vibrated. A message from Mom flashed on my phone screen. "Your dad and I talked all night. The graduation celebration should include you too. When you wake up, I'll take you to the mall so we can buy you a suit, okay?" I did not reply. Instead, I blocked them one after another. Dad, Mom, and, finally, Whitney. After that, I left the family group chat called Our Loving Family. The world became quiet. I turned off my phone, picked up my suitcase, and walked toward my departure gate. The flight from the northern hills to the southern coast took 3 hours and 20 minutes. When the wheels of the plane touched down at Seabreeze International Airport, the air that greeted me through the jet bridge was warm, humid, and smelled faintly of sea salt. It was nothing like the crisp, dry air of Northbridge. I rented a small, cheap room in a quiet motel near the campus. My official dormitory check-in was still 3 days away, but I did not mind. I set my solitary suitcase beside the bed, walked over to the window, and opened it wide. A gentle ocean breeze rustled the sheer white curtains. For the first time in 18 years, my chest didn't feel tightly bound by invisible iron bands. I took a deep, unobstructed breath. I had no house keys. I had no group chat notifications. I had no family waiting for me to play the dutiful, quiet background figure. I pulled out my phone. It was still turned off. I pulled out the SIM card, walked over to the small trash bin in the corner, and dropped it inside. Then slid a brand new SIM card with a fresh southern phone number into the tray. My old life was officially dead. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away, the grand ballroom of the Royal Crystal Hotel in Northbridge was lit up with golden chandeliers. 4 massive round tables were covered in white linen, fine china, and expensive floral arrangements. A huge banner hung across the back wall, bold and bright. "Congratulations to Jeff Scott on his outstanding SAT achievement in college. Admission." At the head table, my father sat with his shoulders thrown back, holding a glass of aged whiskey. Relatives, old neighbors, and business partners lined up to offer their congratulations. 1420 on the SAT. "That's incredible, Scott." A family friend laughed, clinking his glass against Dad's. "Jeff's got a bright future ahead of him. Northbridge State is one of the best." Dad beamed with pride, taking a heavy sip. "Well, the boy worked hard. And you know how it is, great genes." Beside him, Mom was dressed in a sleek navy silk dress, her hair done professionally. She held court with her sisters and friends, showing off photos of Jeff's new limited edition sneakers and designer jacket on her phone, and sat next to Whitney, sipping sparkling wine. Jeff was circulating among the younger guests, showing off the carved wooden lion he held in his hand, boasting about how it was an ancient family heirloom passed down to him. Around 7 in the evening, as the main course was served, an elderly aunt looked around the table, frowning slightly. "Where's Henry?" she asked, leaning toward Mom. "I haven't seen him all night. Didn't he take his SATs this year too?" Mom's smile flickered for a brief second before she waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, you know Henry," Mom said with a light laugh. "He's always had a bit of an attitude. He didn't do very well on his test, so he was feeling embarrassed. He's probably throwing a quiet little tantrum at home, hiding in his room. Honestly, it's better he stayed home," and chimed in, cutting a piece of steak. "If he came, he'd just sit in the corner with a sour face and ruin Jeff's mood. He's always been so jealous of Jeff." The aunt nodded sympathetically. "Oh well, it's hard when one brother shines so." Much brighter than the other. Some kids just aren't cut out for big things. Jeff grinned, leaning over to hug Mom's shoulders. It's fine, Auntie. Henry's just a quiet guy. He likes staying home. The table erupted in fond laughter. Nobody asked about me again. The waiters brought out a 4-tiered celebration cake, fireworks were lit outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the party went on until midnight. It was nearly 1 in the morning when the family car finally pulled into our driveway. Jeff was half asleep in the back seat, clutching his shopping bags and the wooden lion. Dad was slightly tipsy, humming a tune as he unlocked the front door. And Mom walked in behind him, kicking off their high heels with weary sighs of satisfaction. What a wonderful night, Mom murmured, turning on the foyer light. Everyone was praising Jeff. Of course they were, Dad said proudly, tossing his car keys onto the entry. Cabinet. He's our boy. Mom glanced toward the back hallway where my bedroom was located. The house was completely dark, silent as a graveyard. A slight frown crossed her face. That boy really didn't even leave a light on for us, Mom muttered, her tone turning irritated. He knew we'd be coming home late. He's getting more selfish by the day. I'll go talk to him, and said, her voice sharp with annoyance. He needs to stop this childish behavior. It's embarrassing. And walked down the narrow hallway and knocked heavily on my door. Henry, open up, she called out, rattling the doorknob. Stop playing dead in there. You missed Jeff's banquet, and Mom and Dad are upset. Come out and apologize. There was no answer. Henry, and slammed her palm against the wood. Don't ignore me. When still no sound came from inside, and gritted her teeth, grabbed the spare key from the hallway drawer, and shoved it into the lock. You think you can just lock us out? The door swung open. Anne's words died in her throat. The room was illuminated only by the faint pale glow of the streetlight outside. The window. The bed was stripped completely bare. The mattress sat exposed, devoid of sheets, pillows, or blankets. The desk, usually cluttered with old textbooks and library papers, was completely clear. Not a single pen remained. The wardrobe door hung slightly open. Inside, the hangers swayed emptily and stood frozen in the doorway. What is this? Hearing her tone, Mom walked down the hall, holding a glass of warm water. What's wrong, Anne? Is he refusing to get up? Mom. Anne's voice shook slightly as she pointed into the room. Look. Mom stepped past her into the bedroom. She turned on the overhead light. The harsh white glare flooded the space, exposing the utter emptiness of the room. It didn't look like someone had gone out for a walk. It looked like the room had been abandoned for years. Where are his clothes? Mom's brow furrowed. She rushed over to the closet, pulling open every drawer. They were all empty. She opened the desk. Drawers, nothing but a few specks of dust. Is he threw a temper tantrum and ran away? Dad walked in leaning against the doorframe, his face darkening with anger. At his age. Because we bought Jeff a suit and didn't get him one? Unbelievable. He's 18 years old. Call him, Mom said, pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. Call him. Right now. She dialed my number. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again. Mom blinked, staring at her phone screen in disbelief. No longer in service? Did he change his number? She opened our messaging app to send a text in the family group. You cannot send messages to this group as you are no longer a member. Below it, a small system notification read. Henry has left the group. Our loving family. He left the group, Mom whispered, her face going pale. He blocked my number. Let me try, and said hastily, pulling out her own phone. Blocked. Dad tried. Blocked. That ungrateful little brat. Dad smashed his hand onto the empty desk, making the wooden frame rattle. How dare he? We feed him, we clothe him, we give him a roof over his head, and he acts like an ungrateful dog because his brother got a few nice gifts. Wait, Jeff said softly from the doorway. He was standing there, holding his new shoes, looking confused. Look at the coffee table in the living room. They all walked back out to the living room. There, resting on the clean marble surface, was my house key. And right beside it lay the dark, worn metal bookmark Whitney had given me 3 years ago. Whitney arrived at our house early the next morning. She was wearing a pretty yellow summer dress, carrying a box of gourmet pastries to share with the family. She had spent the entire night texting Jeff, planning their upcoming dorm room decorations for Northbridge. When she walked through the front door, she immediately sensed the heavy, suffocating atmosphere in the living room. Mom was sitting on the sofa, her eyes red and puffy, holding a mug of tea that had long gone cold. Dad was pacing back and forth near the window, smoking a cigarette, something he only did when he was extremely stressed, and was staring at her laptop screen with a grim expression. Good morning, everyone, Whitney said cautiously, setting the pastry box on the dining table. Did something happen? and raised her head, looking at Whitney with a complex expression. She pointed to the coffee table. "Did you give Henry this bookmark?" and asked. Whitney looked down. Her eyes landed on the aged metal bookmark resting beside the brass house key. A sharp, sudden pang struck her chest. She remembered that afternoon 3 years ago. It had been raining heavily. Outside the central library, Henry had sat beside her near the window, quietly, taking notes on a complex history book. She had slipped that bookmark into his book, whispering with a laugh, "From now on, all my patience for reading belongs to you." Back then, Henry's eyes had lit up with a rare, beautiful warmth. He had treasured that cheap piece of metal, like it was made of solid gold, keeping it tucked inside whatever book he was reading every single day. "Yeah." Whitney's voice dropped. "I gave that to him in our freshman year. Why? Is it sitting there?" "He left," Mom said, her voice cracking as she wiped a fresh tear from her cheek. "He packed up all his things in the middle of the night, left his house, keys, blocked all our numbers, and ran away." Whitney froze. Ran away? Where would he go? His SAT scores were. She paused, biting her lip. "He doesn't have much money, does he?" He sold his stuff, and said quietly, her voice hollow. "I checked his online marketplace account this morning. Over the past 3 days he sold his old bike, his reference books, his desk lamp, even his old winter coats. He cleared out everything he owned." Whitney felt a cold drop of sweat run down her spine. He sold his winter coats. Why would someone sell their winter coats if they were planning to go to college? In Northbridge, where winters were freezing and snowy. Before anyone could answer, the front doorbell rang sharply. Dad hurried over and opened the door. Standing outside was the local mail carrier, holding a heavy, official white envelope stamped with golden foil. "Delivery for Henry Scott," the mail carrier said politely. "It requires a signature." "I'm his father. I'll sign for it," Dad said gruffly, scribbling his name on the electronic pad. The mail carrier handed over the letter and left. Dad looked down at the envelope. The return address in the top left corner read, "Office of Undergraduate Admissions, Seabreeze University." Seabreeze University? Dad frowned, reading the text aloud. "Where the hell is Seabreeze University?" It's a top-tier private university on the southern coast," Whitney said, her voice trembling slightly as she stepped forward. "It's over 1,000 miles from here." And grabbed the envelope from Dad's hand and tore it open without hesitation. Inside was a heavy parchment document printed with elegant gold lettering. "Official Notice of Acceptance and Presidential Scholarship Award. Dear Henry Scott, we are thrilled to inform you of your acceptance to the Honors Finance Program at Seabreeze University for the upcoming academic year. Based on your extraordinary academic record and your near-perfect SAT score of 1590, you have been awarded our full institutional scholarship, covering 100% of tuition, room, and board." The document slipped from Anne's fingers, fluttering slowly through the air, before landing silently on the floor. The living room fell into a dead, terrifying silence. Mom slowly stood up from the sofa, her face entirely devoid of color. What did that say?" 1590, and whispered, her voice barely audible. "His SAT score was a 1590. 1590. Dad roared, his face turning from pale white to a deep, dark purple. "How is that possible? He told us he did terribly. He said he was going to a community college." "He didn't say that," Whitney blurted out, her hands shaking so hard she had to grip the back of a chair to stay upright. Memory after memory flooded back into Whitney's mind like sharp shards of broken glass. 3 days ago, when the scores came out, Mom handing Jeff the sweetest apple slice. "It's okay if you didn't do well, Henry. We won't look down on you even if you go to a community college." Henry's phone lit up with a notification from his teacher. "Henry, congratulations. I can't believe you got a 1590. Henry locking his phone, hiding it face down, whispering, "I know." Nobody had asked him. Not once. Not his father, not his mother, not his sister, and not her. They had all simply assumed, because he was quiet, because he didn't boast, because he didn't demand expensive shoes or designer jackets, that he was a failure. They had celebrated Jeff's 1420 like it was a world-shattering achievement while completely stepping on the boy who had scored near perfection. "The post," Whitney whispered, her eyes widening in horror as she pulled out her phone. "What post?" and demanded, her voice rising in panic. Whitney's fingers flew across her screen, pulling up the viral online forum thread from 4 days ago. "Both my older and younger sons are going to Northbridge for college. How should I split their living expenses so it's fair?" Whitney scrolled down to the top-voted comment, the one written by Anne. "The older one is pretty average looking, and he's awkward and quiet. Even if you gave him money, he wouldn't know what to spend it on. Meanwhile, the younger one is outgoing and handsome. If you ask me, the older one should get $800, and the younger one should get $8,000. And beneath it, Whitney's own reply. Couldn't have said it better myself. Whitney looked up at Anne, tears spilling over her eyelashes. He saw it. He saw the post. And stared at the screen, her breath catching in her throat. What are you talking about? He was on his phone right before you guys took Jeff to the mall. Whitney sobbed, the crushing weight of realization slamming into her chest. He read what you wrote. He read what I wrote. He knew we were leaving him behind. Mom collapsed back onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands, letting out a ragged, heartbroken wail. My boy. Mom wept. He didn't run away because he was mad about a suit. He left because he knew we didn't want him. That's absurd. Dad yelled, though his voice lacked any real conviction, his eyes darting around the empty living room in hidden panic. We're his parents. How could he think we didn't want him? We fed him. We paid for his high school. Did we? Jeff stood at the edge of the hallway, holding the wooden lion Grandpa had carved. His face was pale, his voice surprisingly small. What do you mean, Jeff? Dad turned to him. Henry's room. Jeff swallowed hard, looking down at the wooden toy in his hands. I went into his room yesterday to look for a charger. I saw his notebook on the floor. Jeff walked over and placed a worn spiral notebook on the coffee table. He kept a tally, Jeff whispered. For the last 3 years. Every time Mom bought me clothes, every time Dad took me out, every time and gave me money. He wrote down the date and reached out with a trembling hand and opened the notebook. July 14th. Jeff got $2,000 sneakers. Mom gave me a $5 grocery coupon. November 3rd. Family went to the amusement park for Jeff's birthday. I stayed home with a high fever. Nobody left food in the fridge. May 12th. Whitney brought basketball shoes for me and Jeff. She forgot I haven't played basketball since my knee surgery 3 years ago. June 24th. SAT scores released. I got 1590. Jeff got 1420. Mom told me not to feel bad about going to community college. Dad gave Jeff $8,000. At the very bottom of the last page, written in clean, steady black ink, was a single sentence. I am done counting in the dark. August arrived, bringing scorching heat to Northbridge. The Scott household had fallen into an unbearable, heavy silence. The grand graduation excitement had completely evaporated. The expensive, limited edition shoes Jeff had bought sat in his closet, untouched. Whenever relatives called to ask about Henry's college plans, Mom would quickly make up an excuse and hang up the phone, unable to face the truth. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles south, Seabreeze University was bathed in endless, golden sunshine and ocean breezes. I stood on the balcony of my new dormitory room on the 4th floor of the Honors Hall. The room was spacious, bright, and modern, equipped with a private desk, an ergonomic chair, and a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the blue waters of the bay. My roommate, Leo, was a tall, cheerful guy from California who was majoring in marine biology. Hey, Henry. Leo walked into the room, tossing a cold bottle of lemonade onto my desk. The department head just posted the list for the freshman research assistantships. Your name is at the very top. You got the position with Professor Vance. I caught the lemonade, a genuine smile spreading across my face. Thanks, Leo. Man, you're a legend already, Leo grinned, slapping my shoulder. A 1590 SAT score, full presidential scholarship, and now a research spot as a freshman? You're going to own this campus. I just like keeping busy, I said softly, taking a sip of the cold drink. And it was true. Over the past month, I hadn't spent a single second dwelling on the past. I filled my days with reading, setting up my new life, exploring the coastal city, and preparing for my courses. Without the constant, suffocating pressure of being the dull, awkward, understanding middle child, my mind felt sharp, clear, and full of energy. I bought clean, well-fitting clothes with my scholarship stipend, grew out my hair into a neat, modern style, and began going to the campus gym every morning. When I looked in the mirror now, I no longer saw the pale, slouching boy who hid in the attic counting to 100. I saw a young man standing tall, confident, and ready to take on the world. Just like Grandpa had promised. One day, our Henry will be just like this lion. You'll surprise everyone. Back in Northbridge, college orientation week had begun. Jeff and Whitney both moved into their respective dorms at Northbridge State University. In the past, Jeff had always relied on me to help him organize his schedule, pack his bags, and fix his mistakes. Now, without me around to quietly handle everything behind the scenes, his life quickly turned into a chaotic mess. Jeff, where are your tuition receipts? Mom asked frantically, rummaging through a pile of scattered papers in Jeff's messy dorm room. The registrar's office says you missed the payment deadline. I don't know. Jeff yelled back, frustrated as he played a video game on his Chair. Henry used to handle all my paperwork. How am I supposed to know where it is? Don't yell at your mother. Dad snapped, sweating profusely as he carried heavy boxes up 3 flights of stairs. Why can't you be more organized like? Dad stopped mid-sentence. The name Henry hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Nobody finished the thought. Whitney sat on the edge of Jeff's unmade bed, watching the family argue. She looked at Jeff, his messy clothes, his selfish outburst, his complete lack of responsibility, and felt an overwhelming sense of fatigue wash over her. Is this the guy I thought was so full of life? Whitney thought bitterly to herself. She pulled out her phone and opened her messaging app. She tapped on my contact picture, a plain gray silhouette, and typed out a message, even though she knew it wouldn't deliver. Henry, I'm sorry. I really am. Please, just tell me you're okay. The red exclamation mark appeared instantly beside the text. Message failed to send. Whitney pulled her knees up to her chest, resting her chin on her arms, tears silently dripping onto her phone screen. She had traded away a diamond for a handful of colorful glass beads. And now, she was left with nothing but regret. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. Late autumn arrived. At Seabreeze University, the annual Freshman Financial Innovation Summit was holding its keynote presentation in the Grand Auditorium. Over 500 students, faculty members, and visiting corporate recruiters packed the hall. I stood on the center stage, wearing a crisp dark blue suit, holding a presenter clicker in my hand. Behind me, a massive digital projection screen displayed my team's research project on algorithmic market predictions. My voice was steady, clear, and resonant, echoing through the speakers with absolute authority. In conclusion, I said, looking out at the crowd with a warm, calm confidence, risk management isn't about avoiding the storm. It's about building a structure strong enough to stand on its own. The auditorium erupted into thunderous applause. Professor Vance, sitting in the front row, stood up and clapped proudly. Beside him, several talent scouts from top investment firms were already writing down my name. When I walked off the stage into the backstage lounge, Leo grabbed me in a headlock, laughing loudly. You crushed it, man. You looked like a CEO up there. Thanks to the team. I smiled, straightening my tie. Hey, Henry, the backstage manager called out, pointing toward the side entrance of the auditorium. There are a couple of people outside asking for you. They say they're your family. My smile faded slightly. Family? Leo blinked in surprise. I thought you said your family lived up north. I'll go check, I said calmly. I walked down the quiet carpeted hallway toward the side exit. I pushed open the double doors. Standing under the warm afternoon sun of the courtyard were 3 people. Mom and Whitney. They looked exhausted. Mom's hair was streaked with far more gray than I remembered, and she was clutching her handbag tightly against her stomach. And looked thin, dark circles under her eyes. Whitney wore a simple cardigan, her eyes red-rimmed as if she had been crying for hours. They had spent 2 weeks pulling favors through high school contacts, tracking down university admission records, until they finally found where I had gone. When they turned around and saw me, all 3 of them froze. They stared at me as if they were looking at a complete stranger. The quiet, slouching boy in the worn-out white t-shirt was gone. Standing before them was a tall, strikingly handsome young man in a tailored suit, his posture straight, his shoulders broad, his eyes calm, sharp, and completely unfazed by their presence. Henry, Mom gasped, tears instantly springing to her eyes. She took a trembling step forward, reaching out her arms. Henry, my baby. I did not move. I did not step forward. I stood 10 feet away from them, my hands casually resting in my suit pockets, looking at them with the polite, distant curiosity one might give to a passing stranger on the street. Can I help you? I asked. My voice was smooth, deep, and completely devoid of emotion. Mom's outstretched hands froze in midair. Hearing that cold, unfamiliar tone from me seemed to hurt her more than if I had yelled at her. Henry. Mom sobbed, pulling a crumpled handkerchief from her bag to wipe her face. How could you speak to your mother like that? Do you have any idea how hard we've been searching for you? We were worried sick. Worried? I tilted my head slightly, my expression unbothered. Why would you be worried? You have Jeff. He got a 1420 on his SATs, didn't he? He's outgoing, handsome, and wears $2,000 shoes. You have the perfect son. And stepped forward, her face flushing with a mix of shame and frustration. Henry, stop being so sarcastic, and said, her voice shaking. We know we made mistakes. We know we didn't pay enough attention to you. But you ran away. Without saying a word. You blocked our numbers. Do you know what Mom went through these past 2 months? She hasn't slept a full night. And I looked her straight in the eyes, my tone deadpan. Did you bring the $8,000 for Jeff's living expenses today? And choked on her breath, stepping back as if she had been slapped. I read your comment. I continued calmly, my voice ringing clearly through the quiet courtyard. You said I was awkward, average-looking, and wouldn't know how to spend money even if it was given to me. You said Jeff deserved 10 times more than me. Henry, I didn't mean it like that. And stammered desperately, her eyes brimming with tears. I was just trying to impress people online. I didn't think you'd see it. It doesn't matter whether I saw it or not, I said softly. It was what you truly believed. I turned my eyes to Whitney, who was standing quietly behind them, her knuckles white as she gripped her cardigan. And you, Whitney, I said. Whitney flinched, looking up at me with eyes full of sorrow. Henry, I'm so sorry. I was blind. I was stupid. I thought you were happy being quiet. I didn't realize how much pain you were in. I wasn't in pain because I was quiet, I corrected her gently. I was in pain because the people I cared about treated my quietness as an excuse to step on me. I reached into my breast pocket and pulled out my watch, checking the time. My team is waiting for me at the post-summit reception. I have to go. Henry, wait. Mom rushed forward, grabbing my sleeve with desperate strength. Please, come home with us. Just for Thanksgiving. Your dad is waiting at home. He promised he'd buy you whatever suit you want. We can restart. We can be a real family again. I looked down at her hands gripping my suit sleeve. Gently, firmly, I reached down and unclasped her fingers one by one. Mom, I said, using the title for the very last time. Do you remember when we played hide and seek when I was 10? Mom blinked, bewildered. What? You, Dad, and Jeff went downstairs to buy ice cream while I was counting. In the attic, I said with a faint, peaceful smile. I searched every room in the house for hours. I thought I just wasn't looking hard enough. I stepped back, putting 3 feet of clear, open distance between us. It took me 8 years to realize that you didn't hide from me, I said. Cleanly. You just left. So now, I'm done searching. I turned around, adjusted my lapels, and walked back toward the double doors of the auditorium. Henry, Mom screamed behind me, her voice breaking into hysterical weeping. Henry, please, don't leave us. And was crying loudly, calling my name over and over. Whitney stood silently, under the afternoon light, watching my straight, confident back vanish behind the heavy glass doors, knowing deep in her heart that she would never see me again. I didn't look back. Spring returned to the southern coast 2 years later. Seabreeze University was holding its spring commencement ceremony. At 20 years old, I stood at the podium as the youngest valedictorian in the university's history, graduating at the top of the finance department with high honors. A major global investment firm in New York had already signed me as a junior partner with a 6-figure starting salary. The auditorium was filled with thousands of smiling graduates, proud parents, and cheering friends. In the audience sat Leo, my professors, and my new friends who had stood by me, supported me, and valued me for who I truly was. I held my graduation speech in my hands, looking out at the bright, sunlit hall. In my pocket rested a small, wooden carving. Not the old lion I had handed to Jeff. That toy had long been lost or forgotten, in some dusty drawer back in Northbridge. This was a brand new lion I had carved myself out of southern mahogany during my sophomore year. Its lines were sharp, strong, and brave, standing proud against the world. To everyone graduating today, I said into the microphone, my voice clear, steady, and full of warmth. Never let anyone convince you that your quietness is weakness. Never let anyone force you to play the supporting character in a story where you belong at the center. When the world leaves you in the dark, learn to build your own light. The crowd erupted into thunderous, endless applause. Far to the north, in a small, rundown apartment in Northbridge, the Scott family sat around a cramped dining table. Jeff had dropped out of college after failing his second-year exams, having spent all his money on parties and designer clothes. He now worked part-time at a local convenience store, arguing constantly with Dad over rent. Anne's internship had fallen through, and she was stuck at a low-paying clerical job, her social media accounts long abandoned. On the small television in the corner, the local news was broadcasting a special segment on top young national achievers. The news anchor's voice echoed through the quiet room. And finally, 20-year-old Henry Scott from Seabreeze University has been awarded the prestigious National Financial Innovation Leadership Award today, becoming the youngest recipient in history. On the screen, a high-definition photo appeared. There I stood, handsome, composed, wearing a tailored dark suit, smiling warmly, under the bright lights of the award ceremony, looking like a king standing atop his empire. Dad froze with his chopsticks in midair. Mom stared at the television screen, her hand trembling so violently that her glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor into 100 sparkling pieces. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They sat together in the dim, cramped room, watching the boy they had thrown away shine brighter than the sun, realizing at last that their game had ended long ago, and they had lost everything. Outside my window in the south, the ocean breeze was warm, the sky was clear, and the future stretched out wide, beautiful, and endlessly free.